Harvey Catchings spent 11 years in the NBA and another in Europe as a professional basketball player. He was always able to overcome injuries by pushing through them. Not too long ago, he was diagnosed with an ailment he just couldn't push through. This time, Catchings will have to take it slower than ever. That is what happens when you get a new heart.
Man, I got to tell you, if you had asked me 10, 15, 20 years ago if there was even a possibility that I'd have to go through heart transplant surgery, especially being as active as I've been, I said there's absolutely no way. And now, as I sit here before you with a new leaf on life, thanks to the Methodist Hospital, all of the surgeons and nurses and everybody that helped me along the way. Most importantly, God, because without Him, I wouldn't be sitting here. I say no way, but it feels great. It does.
The first indication that Catchings had a heart problem came at a screening of NBA Players Association and NBA Retired Players Association began in the wake of the deaths of Caldwell Jones, who died in 2014, and former Rockets great Moses Malone and Darryl Dawkins, who both passed away in 2015. Jones and Dawkins were teammates of Catchings with the 76ers, and Malone a longtime friend.
The Players Association said, we've got to do something. And they went to the NBA and they said, hey, we got to put something together that we can diagnose these guys to make sure that, guys are okay. So they put together what was called a traveling caravan, where they would go to several NBA cities and they would have doctors and different tests. They would have about 15 to 20 different tests that they would take us through. And believe it or not, we still couldn't get guys to show up for the testing. Guys would say something like, well, I've already got it, ain't nothing gonna change. So, ain't no need of me dealing with it, which is ludicrous.
More than 50 former NBA players died of heart issues between 2000 and 2015 when the screening program began.
We had one guy that came in and they immediately sent him to the hospital because he had some health challenges. But there was some shocking facts that came through after the caravan started moving around to different parts of the country.
Catchings was diagnosed with the leaky heart valve. During surgery to repair that, the doctors determined that the condition was worse than expected. After a number of surgeries in the last couple of years, he was placed on a transplant waiting list.
So Mr. Catchings had a form of what we call dilated cardiomyopathy, meaning the heart gets bigger due to an injury, and there could be 100 different causes of that injury. And it ends up getting bigger and not performing well, so it doesn't pump blood out to the rest of the body, and progressively these patients have a hard time breathing, have a hard time doing their day-to-day activities, and eventually the heart just kind of gives out where it's not performing enough to give blood to the rest of the body.
As much as Catchings couldn't believe that he needed a new heart, Dr. Trachtenberg, who said there are 2,400 heart transplants a year in the U.S. and an average of 50 every year at Houston Methodist, said it was by far the best option.
The survival for a patient with a heart transplant is dramatically better than one that needs one and doesn't get one. So for someone like Mr. Catchings, in that condition that he was in, the average survival would be, half of patients like him would be alive a year later, and half would not. In the case of a transplant, the national survival's just a little bit north of 90% for 1 year, and the average survival is approaching about 12 years for the average patient. One of the few things in medicine we can do that can have such a dramatic impact on patients. We see patients that come to the hospital frail, looking like they've wasted away. They almost look like a skeleton, and then you see them 6 months later after transplant looking like a whole different person that you wouldn't even have recognized.
Getting his body back to where it was has been a challenge for Catchings, whose surgery was just 3 months ago.
And now I find myself basically starting from scratch. I'm learning how to walk again, learning how to balance. And with me, once that personal training is over, I'm done for the rest of the day.
Yeah. It wipes you out?
Wipes you out. It wipes you out. You have no energy level. And the heart that I received was it was a great heart. The rhythm and everything is there. But now, because that period up until then, all I was doing was sitting and laying and sitting and walking here and there, I'm having to build up pretty much every component of my body.
Despite dealing with a number of injuries in his NBA career, this is unlike anything Catchings has ever experienced. But he has seen so many others at Houston Methodist go through what he is going through.
I've met several guys that have gone through and gotten heart transplants. And I mean, they're doing great, you know. So I know that at some point in time, you know, they're telling me that it could take up to a year because this is a marathon and not a race. So I just have to be patient. But once again, you know, being an athlete, you say, okay, well, I can push through this like I did when I was working out. And that's not the case.
Blessed and thankful, Catchings hopes to be an inspiration to others to stay on top of their health, get regular checkups, and give professionals like his team of doctors at Houston Methodist the opportunity to do what they do so well. Medical issues can strike quickly.
Up until the first part of September of last year, everything was fine. And now all of a sudden I'm sitting here talking to you and without somebody else being involved. And that was a big issue for me to address too, was that someone else's worst day became my best day in terms of getting a heart. And, you know, that was a tough reality, you know, to deal with.